Hey, welcome back to Jack Sports Television. We're in the middle of talking about Mr. Dan Gilbert, owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and his comments about LeBron James. And before I get into that, though, I've got to respond to something. Yes, Jesse Jackson, what he said was moronic, but you have to understand, Jesse. Jesse's trying to take a platform and interject himself into something so he can still get back in the limelight. Maybe
exactly, that's my problem.
Maybe he believes that. I don't know. He's from a different generation, and I respect that generation. I don't agree with a lot of the things he's been talking about recently, but that's another topic. That's another show. Back to Mr. Gilbert. Let's be real. The fact of the matter is nobody's going to the games thinking about Dan Gilbert. If they're getting steamrolled by 36 in the middle of the third quarter,
you're right.
Nobody's thinking 2 cents a bit about Dan Gilbert. Okay? Now, the reality is this. They've got some talent on that team, but they're probably looking at about 35, 30 wins at best. That's the reality. That's the reality of the situation. Byron Scott's got to be saying, damn. I get it. Really is. Damn. I'm back to rebuilding again, and good luck to Byron. But the fact of the matter is, I do think it's going to play a role as far as bringing in free agents to Cleveland. I've never been to Cleveland. I've never met anybody in my life that says, you know what, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to Cleveland. I've never met that. They couldn't get free agents to go to Cleveland with LeBron. Maybe there was an inside that those guys knew LeBron might be on his way out. Maybe that. But I do think in the long run, you know, number one, I think David Stern was right in fining Mr. Gilbert $100,000. Okay? The owners, they have a role. You know, they're the CEOs, the owner of the company. Granted, he was hurt. The value of his franchise obviously plummeted probably several $1 million. But to me, there should be a little bit more professionalism at hand. And I know my point differs from yours, and that's fine. But, Damien?
Well, I'll say this. Dan Gilbert has made himself the most faceless non-factor in NBA basketball. I mean, there's enough owners in sports that want to make themselves a part of the game or the reason that you look at their team. And nobody's talking about who the Lakers owner is right now. They got the results, and he just sits back there and collects the check. But what Gilbert did had credibility if he wasn't willing to give this guy $106 million or more just to stay with the team. And if you go out on a letter, an open letter on your website run by NBA.com, and you say this guy quit on us in the postseason, why would you wave that kind of money at him? Okay, so by just doing that, you hurt your own credibility. And then when you go out and say that my team will win a championship before this guy does, now you're putting yourself on the 8 ball. You couldn't get the money to keep him in town. Who are you going to get to bring in there to build it? And if you're a Cleveland Cavalier right now, you have to be mad, chomping at the bit, and just kicking yourself because you're saying this team won 60-plus games in the regular season, and it wasn't because of this man right here with the headband. We had something to do with it too, so I'm saying, yo, I can't wait until October comes around so we can prove it wasn't all about him. Dan Gilbert, if you want to prove something, go out, make a trade now. You've done it the past 3 years where you restructured the team around the one guy. Restructure the team again, get a baller out there, and the first thing you do is when the season starts, put somebody else in that number 23 and move on and go from there.
And I'll tell you what, I don't want you to get me wrong. And first of all, if the Cleveland Cavaliers win a championship before LeBron James and the Miami Heat, I will run through the streets of Cleveland naked, doing something even more ridiculous than just that. I mean, it's not happening. But what my point was, especially if you look at the city of Cleveland, they're behind the Cleveland Indians more so than a lot of cities with bad baseball teams. They're very much behind the Cleveland Browns. And what he had to do something to get this city behind the Cleveland Cavaliers. And they weren't going to be there behind a bad basketball team. They're still not going to be to the extent, like you said, if they're getting blown out every night, the attendance is going to drop, period. It's going to. There's no ifs, ands, about it. It happens in every city, in every organization. But I brought up the website I thought was kind of funny, kissmyasslebron.com, and one of the websites on there, one of the t-shirts on that website says, I love Dan Gilbert. And I'm not saying I love him. If I owned a professional sports franchise, I wouldn't have done what Dan Gilbert did. I would have maybe put out a letter that talked about my disappointment, even my disappointment in the man, but I wouldn't have put it out in the way that Dan Gilbert did. I wouldn't have said the things that Dan Gilbert did. But you know what? You have to realize that to an extent it was brilliant because Dan Gilbert now has that city of Cleveland behind him, at least a good portion of it, in a way they weren't before. And if that accomplished just that, if that got just 10% more people in the building that would have been there, then it was well worth the $100,000, and it was well worth the three of us sitting up here and everybody else saying the guy's a moron just for that 10%, and just to have a city that's as passionate as Cleveland is behind that basketball team a little bit more than they were before he did it.
I got to ask both of you a question. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is important. Now, we got the reaction of Dan Gilbert. We got the retort by Jesse Jackson, which both of y'all are thumbs down on.
Oh,
Take
two
the
thumbs
words,
down, Jesse.
Take the words that Jesse said and attach them to any other person. Does the words that Jesse Jackson said have any credibility? If the same words came out of, say, Rush Limbaugh's mouth or Larry King's mouth, or the same words, because basically he's saying this owner had no business acting like this guy belonged to me and should have never left.
But to me, when you use the word slave, I have an issue with that. And I have to say that I don't believe Jesse Jackson comes out and says the owner of the Cavaliers thought of LeBron James as a slave if that's a black owner. I don't think he does that. And I think you'd agree that he doesn't do that. Jesse Jackson is a race baiter. Let's be honest. That's what the guy does. He jumps into situations and takes a side just based on nothing more than race. Period. That's what the guy does. So that's where my issue is. He wouldn't have done it if it was a black owner. And if anybody else said it, it would have been equally as ridiculous. It would have been as ridiculous if Rush Limbaugh said it. It would have been ridiculous if anybody else said it. Because to me, to call anybody making millions of dollars a slave is just asinine.
Okay. Here's the problem with the statement that I have, though, from Dan Gilbert. All the talk about betrayal. What are you talking about? He didn't just choose where he wanted to play pro basketball. He was drafted. Just so happens he grew up in Akron. Okay. I agree with somewhat of what Jesse said. It was a business contract. Hey, you don't like it, too bad. You had a chance to build the team around LeBron James. You made bad trade, bad free agent acquisition after bad free agent acquisition, bad coaching hires. Yes, Mike Brown was a bad coaching hire. He didn't make any adjustments in the playoffs. And I don't care what sport it is, if you can't make adjustments, you're not going to win. It doesn't guarantee it. He deserved to get his head chopped off. Too bad. You didn't make the right adjustments as far as putting the people around him, and he left. Now, another thing. When we're several weeks into the season, all this, he owns Fathead. You're dropping the price of LeBron's Fathead to $17.41. You talk about Benedict Arnold. All that's fine and dandy. It's good for laughs. But the truth of the matter is, nobody's going to care 2 cents about any of that when you're getting steamrolled. When Chicago's beating the daylights out of you. Whenever Miami goes up there, I'm not exactly sure. I got to check that date. Nobody's going to care 2 cents about that. Now, I just want to chime in on one other thing. It's about LeBron and all the speculation where people constantly talk about legacy, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. He's 25 years old, okay? It's impossible for somebody to say, like I heard several times today, LeBron's never going to be the Michael Jordan. What happens if LeBron averages a triple-double, okay? I know this. I know when Mike left the Bulls in '93, I know that team the next year went to the conference finals and took the Knicks to 7 games. Let's see if the Cavaliers can do that. That's going to speak highly mighty right there. He didn't have really anything around him. So the legacy talk to me is absolutely ridiculous. There's clearly going to be a number 1. That's LeBron James. There's clearly going to be a number 1A. Okay, that's D. Wade. And then we'll have Bosh, and then to go with the others in the mix. But don't get it twisted. That's LeBron James' team. I love Miami. I've seen the Wade County sign. But they're going to have to rename it because it's no longer, I'm telling you right now, it's no longer Wade County. That's LeBron James' team. And some people might not agree, but to me, there's no ifs, ands, or maybes about that.
Well, I mean, just with this offseason, you can't wait to see the orange ball up in the air again. And I want it to be about the whole league because when you saw how active Chicago was in the offseason, you knew they were going to be a player in the offseason. You knew Miami was going to do something. You knew Dallas would do something. And to see these teams actually try to build something, even the Knicks, they gave it a shot. And the Nets, I know they can't wait to get those Daniel Outlaw jerseys out there. But when you see these teams come and play, you want to see balanced basketball and it not be all about LeBron. But I can tell you what it's all about at Jack Sports TV. These great guys, along with me and the Vegas Showgirls, they gets it done. You got to go check them out. More Jack Sports TV coming up.